Welcome everyone to this masterclass. Ms. Moutushi Sengupta is a management professional with more than 25 years of senior leadership experience in the development sector in India. She is currently the director at CoImpact. Her experience has spanned across reputed international funders such as the Department of International Development, MacArthur Foundation, and Oxfam India. Her expertise are in developing and executing institutional and program strategies, building partnerships by establishing systems and processes for appropriate monitoring and evaluation of programs. She is also an accredited life coach with the International Coaching Federation, and in her spare time, she loves to travel widely and is deeply fond of Hindustani music. Moutushi, a very, very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for making time for this session. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to be meeting this group. This is something, the topic is something quite after my heart, and so I'm very excited to be here. So the way I have structured this conversation largely is that, I will be talking about certain elements of systems change and the way we look at it at CoImpact. And then we would have a section where I would be very keen to get your questions and, anything that you would like me to attend to, I would be very happy to do so. So just to start us off, I wanted to say that, as most of us are aware that, systems are basically, interrelated elements that are working with each other and often based on a set of rules to form a unified whole. So we've come across systems in different forms and structures, and they're sort of present all over everywhere that we come across. I mean, literally, societies are organized into systems. You have other forms of systems as well. And when we are talking about social systems, I mean, we are actually talking about norms, policies, laws, and institutions that end up determining the access to resources and opportunity for millions. So why are we looking at systems really? Because many of these systems are not really functioning at the level of efficiency and efficacy that they should be. They're often very unjust, non-inclusive, and not really providing the type of benefits that to the marginalized groups. In fact, they're benefiting certain stakeholder groups far better than others. They are also difficult and though not impossible to shift as such. And we will soon come to the point as to why do we think they are difficult to shift. Now, when we talk about a system as such, a system actually sits on a whole set of, underlying causes and problems, that sort of hold it where it is today. When we talk about systems not really working for a large majority of households and individuals as such, I mean, it's because of the fact that, it is held by certain stakeholder groups and the power is sort of distributed in that system in a way that is not very helpful for this larger groups of people to be able to access the benefits from social processes as such. So if we are looking at finding solutions and to move the systems to a point of equilibrium, a new equilibrium as such, then we have to look at ways by which we can move these levers of change as we move forward. These power bases have to shift forward, or the power structures have to move in ways by which, new stakeholders can come in and take the benefits. When we talk about systems change, the ones that we talk about, especially in the development sector, are usually very large and complex. And I know that, this is not new to you. None of these have very easy solutions. If there were easy solutions, they would have been solved a long time back. I mean, we've been trying to do that for years and years and years, and they still seem to roll back to the same, base position as they were. And so, how do you actually go about finding solutions that are, that are long term and that are sustainable, and they actually can be held by the people who needs them most? And basically, to do that, it is quite impossible to think that, only one institution or one set of people can actually find the answers to this particular crisis or the situation that stands at this point in time. it is absolutely essential that, a whole a set of stakeholders come together, actors, critical actors, or critical set of individuals or institutions come together to find those solutions as such. I mean, they are not going to be solved. The crises that currently are present in these systems cannot be solved by any one single institutions. So, going forward, I just wanted to sort of bring a little bit of understanding of when we talk about climate change, when we talk about, gender justice. I mean, there are typical systems at play. And interestingly, I mean, if we look at the IPCC document, the most recent one, they talk about ecosystems, which are including biosystems as such, which are getting impacted by climate change. And then you have the human society-based systems as such, which end up exacerbating some of those ecosystem, crisis situations. And then both get affected as such. So in a way, you have systems working out at different levels, at different, in different orbits. And I don't think at any point in time we are talking about a static picture as such, as we all know in the field of development. I mean, solutions evolve and they have to be constantly constantly looked at to make sure that they continue to remain relevant. So where is CoImpact coming? CoImpact, basically, for those who do not know us, CoImpact is a global philanthropic collaborative. We are fairly young. We, in fact, started out in 2017. The aim is to look at establishing equitable systems change at scale. So we would like to invest in initiatives across the global south, tackling the root causes of inequality. How do we do it? We basically work through two large funds that we have currently. One is a foundational fund that seeks to support initiatives for just and inclusive systems. And then there is a gender fund, which has been recently launched in the, earlier this year, in fact, which was set up with the vision of ensuring that all women have the opportunity to exercise power, agency, and leadership at all levels as such. So going forward, I mean, what is CoImpact's vision? CoImpact basically looks at, creating a world where people can live fulfilling lives, and in systems which are inclusive as such, where everybody can take the benefits of development, and really, the numbers that we're talking about in the marginalized areas, marginalized communities as such, continue to drastically decline as we move forward. We also stand for a world where all women have the opportunity to exercise power, agency, and leadership at all levels. And why do we think that systems change is important? We think systems change is important because most of the decisions, if you see, today, whether it is policies, whether it is resource deployment, whether it is looking at, the way the leaders are talking, the leaders' services are delivered, or justice ensured, is basically working through systems, current systems that we have at place. If we want to have impact at scale, and looking at impact that can be long lasting, then we have to look at how major systems work, and if we can actually make them to be much more responsive to the needs of people who need them most. So how do we do that? I mean, we basically take a broader ecosystem approach to include support for feminist activists, think tanks, researchers, movement builders, and advocates for women's leadership. We focus on 3 sets of systems, and we sort of are fairly flexible in a way we define these, which is basically health, education, and economic systems, that because we think that they are really, really pivotal in terms of helping achieve the goals that the organization has set for itself. This said, there are cross-cutting issues as well, and climate change is one of those where we are really, really trying to figure out what are the intersection points where we can actually, look at the impact of systems change on women, especially as a result of the drastic changes in climate that we are looking at this point in time. And if you look at data evidence, I mean, we all know that climate change is actually impacting women in a disproportionate way than their male counterparts, and which includes added labor, looking at, additional hours of work per day, looking at, early marriages, increasing rate of early marriages. We're looking at children actually dropping out of school, especially in the adolescent period, forced migrations and displacements. So in a way, the impact of climate change is actually really, really strong in, on women as such at this point in time. And we're still trying to get a better grip of how we can work through, this intersection to look at ways by which we can work with systems to be able to make them much more amenable for the women, so that they're able to retain a level of agency and voice as they experience through this whole process. Now, what is at the core of CoImpact's approach to systems change? We look at partners who are keen to address the whole issue of, the power dynamics and political economy. We strongly believe that, the systems change can happen only when you find solutions which are developed in a contextual manner. So in a way, it is very important to understand the local context, the power play which is there, which is currently at place, and also in terms of, the political economy and the levers which are sort of holding back the system, or not allowing other groups, marginalized groups, to take the benefits from that system. We look at not answering or not working with all the levers of change as such. So once you have figured out what the particular system that you want to see change in, we would expect our program partners, and which they do. There are really, really impressive stories that we have. We basically look at them to identify a set of key levers that can drive change. They're also partners who are looking at not trying to find all solutions by themselves. So they are very, very self-aware. And in many cases, what we find is that, a strong acknowledgement to say that the self is not enough. And you really look at, figuring out ways by which you can help them build powerful coalitions for the change. So in a way, to solve a problem, it is very important to figure out who can play which part in that particular story, and to bring them all into this on the table so that everybody has a better idea of who is doing what. We also look at deepening strategic coherence and strengthening key capabilities, because we firmly believe that to equip our partners to actually move through this change process, they need to strengthen their key capabilities. So CoImpact provides a very strong signal to partners to say that you tell us, what are the areas that you want to strengthen further as an institution to be able to take on this rough and tough journey, which is sometimes really, really a challenging one. But how do you want to gear up? How do you want to build the institution to be able to take care of that journey in the most effective manner? Lastly, I think there's a strong focus on learning and adaptation, where we recognize that systems are not stagnant at any ways. Yes, they are difficult to shift a lot of times, but they're also evolving in some ways. So it's really important to make sure that you have a strong focus on learning and adaptation to ensure that the pathway that the partners have selected for themselves continue to remain relevant. Now, what is there in terms, in addition to what I've just mentioned, there are some elements, key elements to CoImpact's thesis for change. What have we observed over the last few years? We have seen that, systems change often starts with a very, very transformative idea to an identified problem. A lot of times, you are trying to figure out solutions to a whole set of problems as such. And if you really, a lot of times, when you step back, you figure out that maybe, if you are able to figure out the core problem, they will end up building in inputs from some of the other smaller problems that as an institution you're working with. So what is that core problem that needs input and support to be resolved as such. And CoImpact often works with its partner institutions to say what is the transformative idea that they have to be able to bring in that change. We also recognize that, as I said, not work across the whole spectrum of change as such. We would like to we very much encourage our partners to focus on a set of key levers. By key levers, I mean, looking at certain elements of that problem to say that, okay, fine, if we found solutions to this, it would take care of, let's say, 70%, 80%. We don't have a percentage as such, but I'm saying the larger part of the problem would be solved as such. And then go on to find out, how would you go about institutionalizing that change at scale rather than a linear scale-up model. And happy to talk about this through one of the examples later. Thirdly, I think we also are very keen to see, work with organizations which have a strategic vision and, demonstrate great leadership. And when we say great leadership, it's literally looking at teams who are really willing and, trying to cut out the noise and, working to solve a particular problem or a set of problems which are interrelated to each other with full purpose as such. So, how do we go about? To find those partners is a big part of the way CoImpact sources its partnerships. Then we also look at partnerships where there is a very clear articulation of a winning coalition of key actors. This is not about 2 or 3 different organizations coming together to necessarily just pose a solution to a problem. It's much more than that. It is also bringing in partners that bringing in stakeholder groups that the partner institutions may or may not be comfortable with. For instance, in some cases, you may start thinking that, okay, fine, we have, some organization or some public authority or let's say a private authority who you think is a key player in that particular space, and you don't like, as an institution, you may not have, it may not be in your comfort zone to continue to work with them, but to find a long-term solution, it is very essential to bring them to the discussion table. So that's part of what we call as a winning coalition. So it's going much beyond yourself and your own capabilities and figuring out what should be a proper solution to the problem B, rather than, and who should hold which part of that solution, rather than, trying to find solutions to everything yourself. We work with partners who work with complex systems change initiatives and are keen for learning and adaptation. This is something I've referred to in the earlier as well. And also look at, working on ideas that can shift norms as such. So we are looking at long-term change. We are looking at partnerships which are deeply embedded in the communities that they work with, and who understand, the nature of the problem that they are working on and the type of solutions that can actually yield long-term results. As an institution, we have 5 key guiding values. So looking at outcomes focus. So how do we track systems change as such? And this is something that has come up over and over again. And interestingly, there is an article in the Stanford SSIR, I think the latest edition as such, which says that, we probably, killing systems change by just using it too often and too frequently as such. And probably it has come to notice much more than in the past as such. We are looking for scalable solutions. We are looking at solutions that can actually yield, the change in well-being for a large population groups as such. And how do we sort of look at measuring systems change? So we basically say that, there are 3 elements which come together for us. So first is to say that, what are the type of changes that our partner institutions would like to see in the communities that they currently work with. So we call them people outcomes. So basically, we're looking at, the type of changes that would actually become visible over a period of time. And we sort of nudge them to say, okay, fine, what does the picture look like to you in 10 years time, 8 years time? It's on, I mean, you pick up a time period and tell us, what it looks like. And then to make that happen, what needs to change at which part? So which is where the systems change part comes through, where we say, okay, fine, if you want to see this change with the community, what is the system that you need to change to make that happen? And thirdly, we say that, to make these two happen, what are the type of changes you want to see in the organization itself, which we call as organization strengthening outcomes. So CoImpact works with its partners very closely to define these 3 sets of outcomes as such. And year on year, we try to be their partner to handhold and to also learn in that process to figure out, how the journey has been. Sitting today, we recognize you can't, sort of forecast the future 5 years or 10 years down the line to its greatest detail, but we feel that, the more you are able to focus on that direction, the end goal, the clearer the path is, and the relatively easier for the partner institutions to move forward with their own work. We look at partners. The second value that we have is to be partner and community centric. This is no surprise. I think most of you, most of the institutions that you work with are very much with us on this. But just thought we would call this out for the larger audience. Third value that we have is to say that, we will not come with preconceived notions. We would bring a beginner's mind to solving problems. So CoImpact we try, and I hope we are successful to an extent, that to not offer solutions to our partners in any way. We are dependent on the partner deciding and defining what the goal should be and what the pathway should be to achieve that goal. To us, we would want to be present with them when they go through this journey to as much extent as possible. It is very exciting the way we have seen these journeys sort of pan out over the years. And from our perspective, it is not for us to offer solutions in any way. It is for the partner and the team there to actually figure out what works best for them. We also have a very strong focus on diversity. We would like to work with a diverse set of partners. We believe that, the solutions that are considered bring in a very strong element of diversity as part of the solution itself, so that marginalized groups from across, many intersections can get the benefit out of the change in systems. And lastly, I would say that, build trusting partnerships. So we would like to we actively seek to build and sustain, relationships of trust among all our partners as such. So that said, I'd just like to say that, if anybody is interested, I would want to note a word of gratitude or thankfulness for the work that many of my colleagues have done in the organization before me to bring this picture together as such. And if anybody is interested, I would really encourage you to go and visit the handbook that is there in CoImpact's website. So very happy to share. It's a public resource. See if that's of interest and, very much in line with what I have just mentioned. Lastly, before I take questions, I just wanted to share some names of some of our partners. We have got Breakthrough, we've got Pradhan, Seva Bharat, Kashtakari Panchayat, which is the last two being recently are going to be onboarded as we move forward. Then there is Jan Sahas, then there is FES. So it's a growing portfolio and an exciting time for us. So happy to talk through questions or respond to your questions from here. I'm sort of, I've done what I wanted to say about systems change, Anjali.
One of the most interesting things I found was how you said you don't provide solutions to your partners. I think the ones that work on the ground know best, and to handhold them to a certain level is good enough. Participants, if you can please type in your questions in the chat box, or please feel free to unmute yourself and talk as well. While we have the participants' questions coming in, Moutushi. I had a few questions as well. The first one is, what, according to you, are the essential skill sets as well as talent gaps existing in the systems change domain? And what advice do you have for people who would like to join this?
So, very quickly, I'd just like to point out a few that I think are absolutely at the core of this whole process. One is taking an ecosystem view of where you want to go. And, sort of really looking at, what is the larger play of actors, look like at this point in time to be able to find solutions which make sense. So it is where one of the key skills is to figure out the political economy around the problem that you're trying to solve. So having a keen understanding of that. Also in terms of, trying to be completely honest to say what you know and what you don't know, and sort of figuring out who is best present to be able to give you the solutions, there. And we've had our partners sometimes just, sit back and say, oh, we want to solve this problem, but we don't know this part of it. So what do we do? So how do you bring that expertise on board? That's very important. Third is in terms of, acknowledging that you are really trying to look for solutions that are long-term, so how do you bring in various actors? And a lot of times it is about, bringing in government actors, bringing in, other funders to make sure that, you find solutions that are there, that are present there. And lastly, I would say it requires a lot of resilience and diligence going forward. It can be quite a lonely path to actually really try to achieve the type of goals that you set for yourself, and you may not find many friends in that path. But having that tenacity to hang in there and trying to continue working is really critical.
What are the specific challenges you face in India in terms of outreach and work that you are doing in this domain?
So, the processes are, we're still learning in this space at this point in time. I mean, we've got about now 7 + 7, roughly about nearly 20 partners who are working in different spaces in terms of trying to bring about change. And I mean, in terms of challenges, I think I wouldn't put them as challenges. I think the whole concept of trying to look at systems as a whole is fairly new as such, but there is also a lot of excitement among our partners to be able to, run this path themselves. So in a way, it's not entirely out of sync as such, but sometimes, I mean, it's about figuring out what needs to be done, the type of support that you can make available to enable your partners take that journey as well. And as I said, we are learning. Sometimes over the years now, we have figured that, yes, it is important to have some level of coaching available, some level of other types of support available for these partners as such. But yeah, I mean, it's been a learning process ourselves.
Thank you, Moutushi.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I'm Anjali. I'm from Bangalore. So I'm actually working on a couple of ideas. It's around reducing, pollution in the city. It's based on circularity, and it's ultimately aimed at building more sustainable cities and even the areas around the city more climate resilient. My question to you is, what is the motivation for a community to participate in the changes? Because we're talking about system change, a huge part of it is about how well the community adapts and becomes a part of the system. And is it easier to implement these system changes in urban areas or in rural areas? Any experience that you might want to share with us?
So thanks, Anjali. That's a good question, actually. not by choice, but I think if I look at our portfolio in India, largely it is based with partners who are working in rural areas as such, but it wasn't a conscious strategy to do so. That's how it is. On your question on, how do you get the community to sign up for it? I mean, I wish I had the answers myself. But since you are working with them as such, we would expect ideas from you. I expect from the organizations which are working there, and a lot of times you may not have the exact answer, and that's, as I said, I mean, these problems are quite complex as such, and if there were easy solutions to those, they would have probably been solved quite some long back. I mean, there are various ways of solving them as such. But creating those incentives or introducing disincentives that sort of support communities to engage very actively, I mean, is something that is something that needs to be worked through and figured out based on the the geography that you are in, the type of households that you're working with, and figuring and really taking that forward from there.
Okay, thank you. So just to complete that, what I'm thinking is, education is a core part of it, but it's not something that will bring us immediate results, right? And when we talk about incentives, I mean, monetary incentives is something that we can do, but do you think that that's a good way to do it, or policy changes along with this? Is a good way to deal with it.
Anjali, I guess, again, sorry.
I guess until you hear more about my idea, it's difficult for you to comment on it, right?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to have a conversation later, but I think, a lot of times the solution to a problem is never a linear one. I mean, there is no one single solution that can solve a problem. And so maybe a combination of able to, get the results that you want. I mean, all the programs or initiatives that are being supported at this point in time are really, detailed ones. I mean, they have figured, they're trying to figure out, what would those levers be? I mean, and what are the type of changes that, they would like to see come together to make this happen? Otherwise, I mean, it's not one single thing ever, or one or two things which you say that, if you tick the box on those two, the answers are going to be there. They're not. So, yeah, but, probably need to have a deeper conversation on this.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So there are some questions which have come up in the chat as well. And there is from Supratish as well. Devijna, how do you want me to respond?
You can just answer them, Moutushi. Yeah.
Okay. So
whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay. So Pratish, do you want to come up with your question first, and then we can move on to Sabyasachi and Somi as well?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you. So my question was, when we are thinking about systems change, it's not just one entity who would have to take a lead and bring people together or think in a systems perspective and work with different collaborators. It's also for us to think as we are part of a system, and what role do we play in this larger systems kind of perspective. We can be any one particular institution working on one particular cause, or it could be an individual who is working for an institution, to think of the institution in a systems perspective. So there are these two ways to see, right? One to in a big picture perspective, and one is where I am fitting in this big picture. So in this dichotomy, can you please share something? Yeah.
Sure. So, Spritish, I mean, completely get your point in terms of, trying to figure out where do you sit in that system that you're trying to change. The way we try to sort of look at the systems change as such is to sort of work with partners. In fact, they do the work on the ground as such, where they sort of will come back and say, okay, this is the system that I'm trying to work with. I mean, so, and that sort of sits on the type of problem that they're trying to solve. So a lot of times it is about, looking at what is the problem that they're trying to solve. So if I'm looking at my role in the system as such, I mean, I think what is really, really important is for me to figure out is that, what is that specific problem that I'm trying to solve? I mean, and who are the participants in this solution as such, both in terms of causes or the impact that we are talking about as such. So when we talk about, individual systems and individuals who are trying to work on this, I mean, you draw your orbits of that system, based on the type of problems that you're trying to solve. And the impact or the scale of, when we're talking about scale issues as such, then it is a coalition of partners who have to come together. It is not the individual who can actually drive those solutions, define or drive those solutions entirely by themselves. That's been our learning as such. Yeah, that's how I would sort of put it out there.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Sabyasachi is asking about, if we can talk about one example as such. And I would like to take up the case of one of our partners, Breakthrough, where they are looking at, sort of introducing gender transformative education. That's what they're calling it. They started out with a simple problem to say that, how do we make it safe enough for the girl child to complete school and also make it a safe and happy place for her to be able to achieve her education goals as such. So simple as that, saying that, looking at anybody as such, and irrespective of the social background that she comes from, how do we make it safe and how do we make it adequate for her to have a happy experience when she goes and attends a school as such. And for this, they sort of, the type of levers that they have decided to work on is to say that, okay, fine, how can they make the education system to be more gender responsive? And as an institution, they have been working with, several schools over the last few years as such. And I'll just sort of take a moment to talk about, how they moved on to this road to systems change as such. And so in one of the recent conversations with the chief executive officer of Breakthrough, and she was telling us that, how as an institution, they've been working with sets of government schools, 50, 75. And then they sort of sat down to say, okay, fine, in 3 years' time, if we are looking at, continuing with this level of support or this level of inputs to different schools as such, where do we see ourselves in 5 years' time? And then when the linear pathway was sort of taking them to a point of, let's say, 150 or whatever number, then they said, okay, fine, if we have to reach a much larger number, how do we work? And then, that moment of realization to say, okay, fine, then if we have to make that change, then we need to really start working with the education system, the state education system. And following that path, now they have actually gone on and, established MOUs with the state governments of Punjab and Orissa, where they are going to be working with the education machinery available at the state levels in both these places, to make sure that the curriculum becomes much more gender responsive. The teachers, are trained enough to create a safe space for the girl children as such. And to do that, they have sort of identified three sets of activities where they say that, here are these type of activities where we will be the implementers. The second type that they're saying that, we will not do this work ourselves. We will sort of initiate it with different institutions in the education system. And the third set of activities that they're talking about is basically looking at how they can actually, advise on the ecosystem as a whole as such. So if you look at that, it actually takes you to the situation where, the head was actually saying that, we had this moment where we said, we have to stop doing what we do now and now figure out ways by which we can equip others to do that job, the government system as such. And in a way, it has brought in a completely different shift in the way that they have been working as such. And so, and if there was an example that I would like to put out, I mean, this one, and there are other similar journeys that we can talk about.
Hi. So as we know that it is not very easy to build authorization to act, but however, authorizing environments are commonly fragmented and they are very difficult to navigate. So also authorizing structures, often they vary vertically as well, with agents at different levels of an organization or intergovernmental structure enjoying control over different dimensions of the same process. So as you have mentioned that your idea is to winning coalition, that is to like overlapping consensus, if I may say so. So how do you bring different stakeholders of the same organization in the same table? I mean, when there are, yeah.
Are you talking about the internal team or the organization with respect to its external stakeholders?
I think it's maybe the same organization, within the same organization, when there are different power structures, different interests are there. So how do you get all those stakeholders on the same table?
Again, so the task is not ours, but and not everybody wants to go down the path of systems change. I mean, there are several organizations who may want to stay away from this, taking on this journey where you are looking at one single goal at the end of the, when I say one, I mean, it has different dimensions to it, but you're looking at a set of very, very clearly linked goals as such. And it's quite possible that, an organization chooses to work on several ideas, rather than picking up on one as such. I mean, it's an institutional choice that they make as such. But should they want to actually go down the road where you're looking at one set of one targets which are very closely linked to each other, I mean, that is where I think it would make sense to actually have a conversation on the type of initiatives that CoImpact supports. And that means that, there is that the leadership team, and both at the top leadership and at the second level, third level, I mean, with our gender fund, we are very clear that we would like to make our grants to women-led organizations in the global south. So there are inbuilt checks and balances there to make sure that there is voice of staff members who are there in the institution as such, but the institution as a whole needs to come together to be able to pursue this. And that's something that the institution needs to make a choice. I mean, otherwise, as in another situation, we had this comment saying that if you are trying to achieve different sets of goals than what is being written in a proposal that CoImpact ends up supporting, it's going to end up being a very unhappy marriage, because you keep having different sets of expectations from one another, and that's not really a good start as such. We want this this journey to be a happy one, a mutually satisfying one for both the parties.
Yeah, true. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thank you, Somi. Shenmuga Priya has raised her hand. You can unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you so much. So my question is pretty direct. I mean, so right now, I just want to know what CoImpact looks into a partner. I mean, how do you evaluate them, or how do you scout them, or what are the major things that actually CoImpact looks into a partner before onboarding them, or continuing to work with them?
Good. That's a very good question as such. And so in prior years, what we have done is that, so maybe we have gone through an open process to say that, challenge process, calling for proposals, open calls, where we asked organizations to apply with the work that they have been doing if they're interested. We also put out our key pillars or key elements that we would like to see in the organizations or the proposals as such, in terms of, before taking them up for consideration as such. And through that process, we have, developed a fairly significant portfolio of grants as such. Going forward, we probably will have a different sourcing strategy, more in terms of, having conversations and understanding, if there is clear buy-in for this concept of, working on systems change as such, as a goal, and if that is something that is of real key interest to the organization as such. So yeah, I mean, when we're looking for partners, we look for their own understanding of the problem that they want to solve, the level of association with the communities that they are working with, and the amount of work that has already been done. A lot of times we look for, mostly we look for organizations who have sort of pilot tested the initiative in some capacity or other, which sort of have thrown up results to say that, if another set of variables worked upon, this particular problem could have been solved. So we don't really, at this point in time, come in absolutely at a idea stage. We come in with when we actually see that there has been some level of work which has already gone on to solve the problems. And we also look for dedicated leadership, who are trying to, as I said, who are really, really looking to find solutions and work with their teams, respective teams, to find them. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. There's no more questions in the chat box, Moutushi, but while we wait for more questions, I'll just hop on to the next question I had. An organization in the impact sector working at the intersectionality of gender and climate, what, according to you, should be the strategy for systems change, and which larger systems should the impact strategy address?
Again, this is my personal view, Navijna. So, because it would depend on what gets presented and, how we look at it as, as we move forward. But in a way, we would like to, I think partners, when they bring in proposals or ideas by which you can really move the needle from the point of view of this response to disasters, climate disasters, or being pushed into a way in which you can build resilience in communities, in a way that they are able to work with the impact of climate change in a much more meaningful manner, where the community and the works in with one another and with the local institutions of governance to find solutions to the ecosystem damage as well. Those are the types of ideas that I think have a fairly strong chance for support. Some of our partners like FES, which is working to find, better, more productive uses of common lands, could fit into that space, and trying to figure out how women and women-led collectives can actually benefit out of the whole process, and how women-led collectives can also work to regenerate the commons. Those are the type. So I can just take by example. I don't have a exact prototype to offer to your question, but I mean, these are the type of ideas I think where there would be a fair amount of interest from our end as well. Yeah.
That's great.
Raghu has his hand up, I think.
Yeah. Yes, you can unmute yourself, Raghu.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Moutushi. This is Raghu from Catalyst Swastivritti. Thank you for this session.
Good
and
to re-meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just try to switch on my video. Yeah. Great to see you. Thanks a lot. I have, again, twice we have not been very successful in CoImpact from our side. So one is on the women in agriculture, smallholders, and also another one on the system change in the public health side. Both the cases, I think one of the big areas where we found it difficult was this quality of evidence. What is the rigor and how much of that is being weighted when we look at that system. So there's one platform for inclusive entrepreneurship, which we looked at rather than just scaling what we do, but what can be work at scale. That is kind of a platform which we tried. But then we have a POC more at a regular random samples rather than a randomized control trial or something. Similarly, in the regenerative communities with women, also more of case studies and also a lot of mixed method kind of a work, but rather than the quote unquote rigorous evidence using econometric or kind of thing. So how do we see that? Because both the cases we lost out, and then we're just looking at CoImpact being the great fund for a scale, but we have always been unsuccessful on that. Yeah. Thank you again for this session, and just look forward to your answer on that. Yeah.
I'll answer that. I have a hard stop at 7:30, but I think that, it's, and we can have a conversation on this. I mean, there are two things that CoImpact holds very dear to, when we look at ideas as such. One is the track record of the organization. Second is an evidence base of the model that you are trying to actually, look at scaling up as such. So both need to be worked out to some extent. And as I said, I mean, we come in at a stage where the pilot has been successfully tested as such, but happy to have the conversation to see, where things are with your organization at this point in time.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Moutushi, for such an interactive session. I'm sure the audience appreciated having you candidly answer all their questions and got a lot of value out of it. We really appreciate your time. And thank you, everybody, for taking out time on your Thursday evening to attend this.